As I've sat on this bench for over 4 decades, I thought I had seen it all. I've witnessed fathers desperate to feed their children, teenagers who thought they were invincible, and good people who simply made mistakes in bad moments. But that Tuesday morning in November, something stepped into my courtroom that was different. It wasn't just a crime. It was an attitude, an unshakable level of arrogance that silenced the entire room. Before I dive into the details of what happened, and trust me, you'll want to hear this if you believe that justice should be fair. Whether you're a prince or a pauper, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us spread these important lessons on integrity and accountability. It all started early that morning. I arrived at court at 8:15 a.m., just like I always do. My father, Joseph Caprio, was a milkman who came to this country with nothing but a dream. He taught me something I'll never forget. Frank, money screams, but character whispers. Never let the noise of a man's wallet drown out the truth of his heart. So there I was, sipping the espresso my clerk Christina had made for me, looking over the docket. And right at the top of the list, I saw it. The City versus Richard Sterling. Now, Richard Sterling wasn't just any man. He was a billionaire real estate mogul. He owned half the skyline in Providence. But it wasn't just his money that made him notorious. It was his attitude. He was known for evicting elderly tenants without a second thought, for believing that the laws of the city were mere suggestions for people like him. As I went through my morning routine, Christina walked up to my bench. She didn't look just worried, she looked rattled. She whispered that the courtroom was chaotic with more cameras than she'd ever seen. Sterling's security team was practically shoving people out of their seats. It was a circus out there. I glanced at the monitor and she wasn't exaggerating. The gallery was packed. There were reporters from every major network, citizens who had heard the rumors, and a flock of high-priced lawyers dressed in suits worth more than most people's cars. But what stood out to me was the group of regular folks squeezed into the back rows, the tenants he had evicted, the workers he'd stiffed. They were all watching, waiting to see if the system would finally work for them. At 9:00 a.m., my bailiff called the court to order. The room fell silent, but it was a tense silence, like the calm before a storm. I intentionally didn't call Sterling's case first. I wanted to set the tone for the day. This was a courtroom, not a boardroom, and I was the one who set the rules here. The first case was Mrs. Eleanor Vance. She was 78, a retired librarian who walked with a cane. She stood before me, shaking slightly, holding a ticket for parking in a loading zone. She told me she was picking up heart medication. The pharmacy lot had been full and she couldn't walk far. She was only gone for 3 minutes. I looked at her record, clean for 50 years. I looked at her face, honest, scared, and respectful. She reminded me of my own grandmother. I told her not to worry, that I could see a woman who had given her life to the community. As I was about to dismiss her ticket, the courtroom doors slammed open, and that's when Richard Sterling made his grand entrance. Sterling didn't just walk into the room, he barged in. He was talking loudly on his cell phone, flanked by 3 lawyers, wearing sunglasses indoors. He ignored the bailiff. He ignored the silence of the room. And he certainly didn't care about Mrs. Vance, who was standing before the bench. He was shouting about buying up the whole block, crushing anyone who wouldn't sell. The disrespect was so thick you could cut it with a knife. He didn't even look at Mrs. Vance. He just glanced at her cane, sighed loudly, and checked his diamond-encrusted watch. He then raised his voice, asking if we were going to hurry up and get to his case. He declared that his time was worth $10,000 a minute and demanded we wrap up this charity show. Mrs. Vance shrank back, terrified. The officers in the room stiffened. I felt the anger building in my chest, but I kept my face calm. I thought about my father's words. "Frank, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late." Well, Mr. Sterling was about to learn that a lesson about respect was coming his way. I looked directly at him. "Mr. Sterling," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "in this courtroom, we do not shout. We do not wear sunglasses, and we do not interrupt the proceedings. You will wait your turn, just like everyone else." He laughed, a cold, sharp laugh that echoed through the room. He took off his sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes that were as cold as the laugh. "Wait my turn?" he sneered. "Judge, do you know how much money I lose just standing here? I don't wait for traffic lights, I don't wait for tables at restaurants, and I certainly don't wait for a $70 parking ticket to get wrapped up." He turned his gaze to Mrs. Vance and barked, "How much is this fine? $50? $100? Let's wrap this up." Before I could react, Before anyone could intervene, Sterling pulled out a thick roll of $100 bills and tossed it at Mrs. Vance's feet. The entire courtroom gasped. Mrs. Vance froze, her knees shaking as she bent down to pick up the money. I couldn't let this stand. Mrs. Vance, don't touch that money, I commanded. She froze, standing up slowly. I turned my attention to Sterling. He was smiling, thinking he had solved the problem. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice shaking with barely contained anger. You seem to think that because you have a heavy wallet, you have the right to trample on people's dignity. You think you can buy your way out of decency. Sterling shrugged, looking smug. Everyone has a price, Judge. I just paid hers. Can we get to my case now? I stood up from the bench. The room was silent. I wanted him to see that in my courtroom, the only thing that mattered was respect. Mr. Sterling, I said, you are going to pick up that money, every single bill, and you are going to apologize to this woman. He looked at me like I had just asked him to speak another language. I don't pick up change, Judge, he sneered, and I don't apologize to people who waste my time. You want the money? You pick it up or let the janitor do it. That's what you pay them for, right? The bailiff stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. Sterling's arrogance was reaching a breaking point, and I wasn't about to let him get away with it. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice calm but firm, you may think you can buy your way out of anything, but today you're going to learn that there are things money cannot fix. The room held its breath as I prepared to make my next move. What followed was a lesson in humility that would cost Sterling far more than a mere fine. I'm sure he never expected to spend the next 4 hours in my courtroom, sitting quietly while hearing the voices of those he had wronged. But Sterling did. And in the end, the lesson was more valuable than any skyscraper he could build.